It's all right, we're live, so let's leave it alone. Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. We're joined today here in San Jose, California by a legendary drummer from Omaha, Nebraska, Ronnie Beck. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
What's up, Jake?
How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, man.
Yeah, I want you to talk to the audience. In our first interview on the radio, you talked about playing with Barney Kessel. And he said to you, don't feed me so much. And I just wanted you to talk to cats out there about what he meant by that, and then ultimately how to play tastefully behind somebody, still getting what you need, still saying what you need to say, but not with too much vocabulary or language.
Well, first of all, that was in 1981, and things have changed musically quite a bit from then to now.
In what ways?
Well, drummers feed you more than you want to eat nowadays. Drummers play. And it's I'd have to say it's kind of an era of drummers. Drummers are doing amazing things, and they have a lot more freedom to play than they did years ago, going back to bebop and those days in the 60s, 50s. And Barney Kessel was from that era of the 40s, 50s, 60s. He's an old jazz cat, great guitarist, nice guy, but he was used to the drummer playing minimal. A lot of the older style music guys, that's what they prefer. You play less. And there are certain singers that want you to play less, but nowadays a lot of singers really sing off the drums, and they want to hear the drums playing strong and expressing themselves, because it makes you move. I mean, that's what people dance to, is the drums, so they want to hear the drums.
Is it possible to show, to demonstrate, like a traditional Barney, like a straight ahead jazz tune, and where you're not feeding the cat so much?
Right, they just want a regular. The main thing in jazz is ride cymbal and a hi hat. Barney liked that because it gives him room to play, and he had room because he's used to playing a lot without a keyboard player, so the whole harmonic structure was built around his guitar. So he liked to have the freedom to do what he wanted to do. So he was happy just to get a side stick on the backbeat, on the 2 and the 4, and usually on the 4, because 2 and 4 makes it sound corny. So I'm gonna do the 2 and the 4 and just the 4.
Dig.
2, 1, 2, 3.
That's pretty funky. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, Barney was swinging, man. That
was swinging.
How did you wind up with that gig? I mean, that's a stone jazz gig for a guy who's.
Well, Barney was touring a lot, by himself, and he'd go play with the local guys, and a lot of people are doing that because you got qualified musicians in all cities of the United States and all over the world. So there's always some good players around, and then you just travel by yourself, get what you need, get paid more, and play with local guys. Sometimes it's good, sometimes not so good.
You grew up in the bastion of Omaha. I had an opportunity, had a great hang with Billy Rich this week, and he talked about Herbie Rich. Do you remember Herbie?
Absolutely.
Because that dude, talk a little bit about, because this is a people's history of music, Ronnie Beck, so talk about Herbie Rich.
Well, Herbie is Billy's big brother, and Herbie was a phenom before they even had the word phenom. He was a musical genius. He played saxophone, he played piano, he played organ, he played bass. He couldn't play the drums though, and I loved it because he couldn't mess with me. I don't play the drums.
But you didn't have to worry about that.
He didn't mess with me. But if he was a bass, because he was very particular about what he wanted people to play, because he knew. I mean, I watched this guy sit down and write horn charts for a 3-piece horn section 15, 20 minutes and hand them to guys, and they couldn't play it because he was just that. and he was musically trained, and he was a different kind of guy for sure. Very serious with music, though. He was a musical genius.
Bill said that he wrote all the tunes for the Electric Flag.
Herbie had a lot.
And he never got credit for that.
No, because it wasn't about that. A lot of it, as you know, man, you can go back in history. I've been reading about and listening about Tesla, Nikola Tesla, who was a great electrician. He didn't get the credit he deserved. Other people reaped the benefits of his creations, but Herbie was the same kind of guy. It was about the music, it was about the creativity, and about creating something. He had a passion for creativity, and other people were about capitalizing on that and making money, aka the record companies and stars and stuff. So
I dig, man. You know, Curly Martin's tuning in, and I remember Lenny White in my interview. He said Jackie McLean used to yell at him and say, "No backbeat, no backbeat." And Curly said, "You don't need to play backbeat in jazz to you."
Well, Curly told me the same thing.
Can you explain how that loosens the groove by not playing backbeat in traditional jazz?
Well, it's just by what you're just saying. Backbeat is repetitive, so it's like the same thing happening at the same spot every time in every bar of the song, and that restricts people. In jazz, which is about improvisation, you want air and breathing space so that you can do what it is you're feeling in those holes. And if you got this backbeat, constant backbeat, it restricts you, and it takes up space. You're taking up that space on 2 and 4 for the whole song, and it's like if you're trying to go outside or create and do some serious playing in between, you want as less as possible. And in jazz particularly, man, an upright bass and the ride cymbal and the hi-hat, that's what they feed off of. Keyboard players, piano players want that whole, horn players definitely want that air. And they want you to really listen to them and do things to complement what they're doing. And that wasn't. That's taking up space. Styles of music with that's what it called for. Like the blues is rooted in that, the backbeat, especially if you got dancers out there. But jazz is more of head music. People didn't really dance to jazz. They danced to big band jazz, and they all usually had a backbeat. And there's styles of jazz, dance music, the big band stuff. I mean, that was arrangements and all that was created for people to dance to. But then when you get into a more intellectual form of jazz, abstract and avant-garde and all that, freestyle, it's about space and openness, and just each guy can contribute musically to the whole picture.
Absolutely. Actually, people are already just saying I was going to ask you about the most free setting you've ever played in.
I was very young. I was a teenager, and it was with my brother, who was a great B3 player.
What was his name?
Donnie Beck, my twin brother.
It's Donnie Beck.
Yeah, Donnie Beck.
He's still with us?
No, he's gone.
Rest in peace, man.
He died last year. And we were listening to Larry Young and Jack McDuff and Groove Holmes, and Jimmy Smith, and those guys. We had an organ trio, and we were also trying to explore, and we were listening to James Brown. Okay?
That's where the funk came in.
Well, but we were trying to learn how to play more open. You know, there were guys coming out, you know, that were playing, like Elvin Jones, for example. He fed you, but the music called for that. Coltrane wanted all of that activity behind him, man, because it fed him. He played off of that. I mean, I've done gigs where the band leader will say sax and drums, and it's just the drums and sax, man, and we take it out. Go anywhere we want to go, because there's no restriction. And then we come back, and then everybody else joins in, and we're back to the song. But that's what it was about, just creating holes in space for everybody to do their thing.
People want you to just, could you play something where you just can breathe and go off and play free?
Well,
play what you feel.
It's kind of what I was doing before. I mean, there will be usually a tempo, and then you're playing within that tempo. And the bass, a lot of times, is what holds that whole thing together. The bass, upright bass or electric bass. They are the pulse. They're usually playing quarter notes. Boom, 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 boom. And then there'll get more sophisticated too. But that's what's holding it together. The drummer's free, the keyboard's free, the guitar's free, the sax free, trumpet, whatever's sitting on top of the bass is the root in that style of music.
When you were just hitting with sax and drums, how do you keep the rhythm?
So your internal clock.
And the internal time feel.
Oh yeah, it's the internal clock.
Internal clock.
And even when I was doing there, I was trying to like lock in on the tempo, but I was playing around the one. I knew where the one was at, and cats that are there with you because it's just this pulse. And it's just. I mean, it's just like random stuff, and then it gets intense, and then it can come back down. It can go left, it can go right, up, down, inside out, backwards, forwards, but there's a pulse. And everybody hopefully is tuned into that. Drummers, to my internal clock is right here in the center of my body, man. And it's like, I've trained it and honed it. You know, I kind of had a natural gift for good timing. And in fact, I have to say, good timing is number one for the drummer. The most important thing of the drummer is to keep accurate time.
Absolutely. You talk about Calvin. Calvin was learning from your mom?
Calvin was a blues guitar player.
Calvin Keys, by the way, who's definitely tuning into this later.
Yeah, Calvin was playing blues. I mean, I didn't know what kind of music he was playing because I was a kid.
Yeah, right.
But Calvin was wanting to explore and learn jazz. I mean, Wes Montgomery was hot back then, and the guitar players were really starting to come to the forefront playing jazz. And Calvin understood how to play blues, and it's really good that he did because jazz is rooted in blues. And there's a generation of jazz cats out there now that really can't play the blues, man. And blues is a very bass style of music. It's very grounded, and it's easily related to people who could easily relate to what the blues is saying. And that's important to me, I think, in jazz and funk and anything else, that there's that thread that people can relate to.
Absolutely.
And so Calvin was ahead of the game by knowing how to play the blues.
But that goes back to the blues came out of the church, as John Hendricks reminded us with the evolution of the blues.
Well, that's true. Blues really came out of the cotton fields and the plantations.
It did.
Where it really came from.
Did you get a chance to go into the Sanctified Church at all and see the elders clapping? It was really those jagged, because they would clap on 3 and 4. They weren't always clapping on 2 and 4.
Oh, yes, they were.
Did you have an opportunity to experience
the as an adult, actually. I didn't grow up in the church as a kid. I grew up in a church that was more intellectual. It wasn't based in the holiness or the Pentecostal or any of those real physical experiences in church. And I was out here and I went to a holiness church, man, and it was an experience because I had a friend whose dad was a pastor of a holiness church, Paul Smith. And I went to his dad's church, man, and I got scared the first time I saw it.
Why?
Because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have any.
What was going on?
Just any and everything. Just the spirit being released very loudly.
I love it. Spirit releasing loudly. Yeah. Like train.
Yeah, making a joyful noise. Yeah, and everybody was in tune. I mean, people speaking in tongues and the whole bit. I mean, it was like, whoa, what is this?
You had people falling out of the pews?
Absolutely.
Wow. And what church was it?
This was, what's the name of it?
Oh, it's irrelevant, really.
It was the Church of God in Christ. I remember that. They call that Kojic, Church of God in Christ. It was a Kojic church, which is a holiness church.
Talking about the lineage, though, where younger cats don't seem to have the, they don't go back far enough, or they don't know about the blues. Because a lot of cats, I mean, Ndugu told me a lot of great drummers are coming out of the church today, but are they fully equipped, or do they go back far enough?
I think a lot of them do, absolutely, man, because they know. Because at some point, I mean, right now drummers like to play a lot, but if you're playing in church, there's an opportunity for you to play a lot, but you also have to know how to give them a good old-fashioned stomp. I mean, that's just tune 4. That's all they want. They don't need no drum fills because they're building off of that. And the old lady's playing the tambourine, and this gets serious.
Absolutely.
It's very, very fast. So they understand how to, what we call pocket, how to just play simple stuff and hold it together. And they also have the chops and the imagination to play all of that other stuff because they studied and learned how to do that. So there's a lot of the guys out of the church have done their history. It's part of their education in through the church is to do the history, because if you play contemporary gospel and you may go back and do an old Negro spiritual in church, and you got to know what to play. So the history is there.
Talking to Ronnie Beck here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Pat McMahon has been. It's Ronnie Beck. People are bothering me because they want to know your last name. Oakland had its own sound, but cats like Garibaldi were looking at you, always checking you out as a drummer. San Francisco, Rico, and Michael Shreve was there. How would you define the San Jose sound? Because it's clearly that there was a distinct with Turk, and with Coulter, Mel Brown, and yourself. It was different than the other regions of the Bay.
If I can say this, and I hope I'm being accurate, I can speak on my own recollection of the difference between Oakland and San Jose. Most of the cats in Oakland went through the church and learned how to play in the church. So there was a whole tradition with coming out of the church. For me, in San Jose, there were a lot of cats that knew about the church, but they hadn't necessarily hung out in the church and learned to play in the church. They learned to play at home, or they learned to play from other musicians. And that was kind of the difference in San Jose than Oakland. Like Clifford Coulter, who I became friends with on day one back in 1971, he'd been in the church and he understood where that came from, but he was into the jazz and he was into taking that gift and that talent and getting paid. So cats in San Jose, there was a different motivation beyond just learn how to play. We were trying to make a living playing.
How would you be? What were the gigs? How would you get paid? It was jazz. Jazz wasn't paying. You were playing more funk and R&B.
Playing R&B, playing standards, playing Frank Sinatra, doing whatever the gig called for. The country clubs wanted to hear jazz and Sinatra and Tony Bennett and those guys. They wanted to hear that kind of stuff. And then you go to
Coulter was singing that stuff.
Coulter sang more the Ray Charles kind of stuff.
I did, because when you first hung out with Clifford Coulter. Well, I mean, yeah, in the phone contact it came up Coulter, but he had just finished playing with B.B. King.
Right.
I mean, so the blues were deeply rooted in the San Jose sound, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about the idea that if there are cats that don't have the money to go to the academy and learn quote unquote jazz. I don't know if you can really learn jazz in the academy. How do they develop their own individual sound?
Part of developing your own sound is having an idea of who you are and what kind of statement you're trying to make. What you want to take, what you've learned from the academy or from the streets or wherever you got your knowledge and your technical knowledge and your intellectual knowledge from, be it school or street knowledge, how you use it is what helps you determine your own style or your sound. Because you can have 3 or 4 different guys play the exact same thing and it'll sound different. Because
each one has their own heart. It's not coming from the arms, it's coming from the soul.
It's not mechanical, it's spiritual.
That's right. And but what about cats today like, Rick Marotta said that he hears someone playing, he's like, that's got to be machine parts, and he walks in, it's a younger cat playing. So they're playing that digital sound.
There's a reason for that. In the 80s when drum machines came out and music was starting to be created using drum machines, guys had to learn how to play that accurate sound because that was part of the sound that was popular. So you had to learn how to play like that. That's one of the differences now, because there was a period, like I'd say in the 90s, where there wasn't a whole lot going on in the 80s, because it was so much drum machines. But what has happened, man, in the millennials and since the late 90s and the 2000s, these drummers now have the precision of a drum machine, but their own human emotion, and that's what has taken the drums to a whole new level, man. I mean, it really is. There's guys that gig with drums and DJ. They have a guy spinning records and there's a drummer, and they're gigging like that, and they're playing to a click track, because most music is recorded to a precise time piece or time source, so you have to be accurate. So drummers nowadays are way more accurate than we were because of drum machines. Really, because of drum machines. Yeah.
Having a ball here with Ronnie Beck. You know, did you consider the music? You talked about what kind of statement do cats want to make? Did you guys play movement music at all? What I mean by that is, Masakela would go and play Black Panther rallies. Did you play political rallies? What I see today is a lot of disparate groups coming together, whether it's Black Lives Matter or it could be any of these groups, and the lacking component is music.
Well, you got to go back to the 60s, to the what was it?
The Civil Rights Movement.
The Last Poets, those guys, and Gil Scott-Heron.
Oh,
those
yeah.
guys. You can go all the way back to the 50s with Nina Simone. So there was movement music going on. There weren't a lot of people doing it. You can even go to Harry Belafonte. They were making a political statement and civil rights statement through the music, and they were supplying the music for that movement. So there was music that Coltrane's music used a lot in the civil rights movement because it was so spiritual, man, and it spoke to the oppression of our people. You know, we need some music that will touch you. And when you hear that music and you heard Coltrane and those cats of Love Supreme, it's like it was spiritual and it would touch you. Those that could feel it. And that's what the music was about. So it was a movement, and that's been there all the time. And that started on the plantation and in the cotton fields. Because it was a means of communication. It was also an outlet for their people's woes and their downtrodden lifestyle. Man, I'm going to go drink me some beer and play the blues.
Well, but then obviously you had slaves running away from the plantation and merging with the Native Americans and having all that incredible, Mardi Gras Indian flavor that was going on as well. But I mean, in San Jose, were there cats down there that were leading? It seems like San Jose always flies below the radar. It's one of the coolest places in the world, but it always gets, lost in the shuffle with Oakland. I mean, Mike Clark was playing Black Panther rallies with Paul Jackson. He was so uneducated, and then when he actually went to these rallies with Angela Davis, he's like, then he was really pissed off, because he couldn't, and he's so educated cats.
Well, what happens is you find out what's behind that music, what's the inspiration for that music is. It's more than just the music. There's a message, a statement that's trying to be made globally through that music. So it was much bigger than just the music, and you did have to be educated to why this was happening, what's it about, what is the urgency of the music was the times that we lived in, man. I mean, there's some of that even now.
More than ever.
In a different way, like hip hop, man, it really speaks to our culture. I mean, I'm a fan of hip hop. I mean, people didn't think it was going to be around as long as it is, but those cats and women they're making some serious statements, man, and a lot of...
Can you give a shout out to some people that you think are giving the statements as opposed to the ones that are talking about maybe the more commercial or materialistic kind of hip hop?
That's a good question, man. Well, one of the guys that I like, some older cats with the older East Coast hip hop stuff, man. Those guys, man, Heavy Mo, Kool Mo D.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a couple decades removed too. I mean,
but that's where it started. Q-Tip and those guys, man. I mean, I'm not really up on the latest hip-hop artists. I mean, I found out about the new music from my students. What are you guys listening to now? And they're listening to all kind of stuff. But no, I can't go right to somebody that's carrying that banner because most cats it's about making money now because it's commercial now. It was underground first, now it's mainstream.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask you about reggae. When reggae first came in, how you...
There's a perfect example of music for the people and making a statement spiritually, and that's Bob Marley and those cats, man. It was Jah, it was spiritual, yeah.
Could you play a reggae beat for the cats out there?
No.
No reggae for you?
No.
So was it something that you didn't even try to take on? I remember like Ron Tutt was so fascinated by Toots and the Maytals, but he was humbled by that because the beat was so fluid.
And that's why I haven't messed with it. First of all, I've never really had to play that style of music. I've never played in a reggae band. I mean, I've hacked through some songs. I mean, give me a reggae beat on a club gig somewhere, and I learned a one drop, which is just the bass drum on the side, stick on the 2 and the 4. That's as close as I can get to reggae, but for me, reggae drummers have a really strong hi-hat hand, and they do like some really amazing things with the hi-hat to really make that. I was in the Caribbean and got to see some of those guys. Man, they're serious guys, that style of music. And it's not like American black music, which is built around the 1. Theirs is built around the 2.
Have you been to the motherland before?
I've never been to Africa.
Tell me about what the motherland represents to you, though, insofar as the significance of, that's where civilization began. Most people don't even understand that. They don't get that. They don't either want to acknowledge it. The first medicines were created there, first universities, first instruments, and a lot of the cats, like Ahmad Jamal, wouldn't go play there because of the apartheid. Other people like Yusef Lateef would take the cats from Italy and go over and watch a Muslim prayer ceremony. But can you just talk about the significance and the spiritual quality of your people in the motherland, what it means to you?
Well, what it means to me, and I don't know a whole lot about it. I mean, I've met some guys from Africa, and what I've learned through my experience with just meeting guys from Africa, I mean, there were regional things happening. There's guys from Ghana had their thing, guys from Nigeria had their thing, guys from South Africa, because Africa's a big country.
Huge.
So it was each region had its own different thing happening in music, but the one common thread was that it was tribal. It was of the people, for the people, and by the people. Same thing in Brazil and in Mexico and Latin American countries and stuff. You can even go to places like Portugal and Europe. So this was a global thing. It's not just in Africa. Now, as far as the motherland, what it means to me, I don't know enough about the motherland to speak to that. I know what I've learned and experienced from what we call now African Americans, but someone told me just yesterday, and my grandson told me, he said he took a black studies class, and they said, the first thing the teacher said is, we're not African Americans, we're American Africans.
They flipped it.
He flipped it, and it was a she. She flipped it, and it made all kind of sense. We're American Africans.
Wow, I dig that a lot.
AKA Negroes, because that was the name that was first given us. So we're not African Americans, we're American Africans. And I truly believe that, and that makes all the sense in the world to me. So there's no real connection for those that have not done the history, and there's no thread, because as you know, with slavery and us being brought here, we were the only ethnicity that came to the United States that was robbed of its culture. We couldn't bring our culture from Africa here. So it's all here. It started here. It grew from here. So it's not really, some things are from Africa, but it's really American.
Well, and the groove is very hypnotic as well. I just was hoping people want you to play. Could you play something? Play what you feel, but I mean, anything tribal? People think of tribal, I'm not sure if that's...
I mean, to me, James Brown is tribal. Again, I'm speaking in terms of like African music in America, American African music.
Yeah.
So
American
that's
African.
Where it started for me. We can go back to the 30s, but we can't go beyond that for me to the 1500s or when they first started bringing us over here, because we were robbed of our culture. We weren't allowed to speak our language. We weren't allowed, that's why the music came out of the cotton fields, because that's where they could play it, or in their churches where they had these private sanctuaries where we could do what we did, and the little bit of culture that we were allowed to bring from Africa had to be kept secret.
Well, and the apparatus you're playing right now was outlawed. In fact, you could be killed for having being caught with a drum.
That I didn't know, but I
Oh, that down in Louisiana, no doubt about it.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's just people trying to stifle growth and expression of a people because we were thought to be less than human.
So, what's perseverance to Ronnie Beck? Talk about how you've made it this far, and what's your words of advice to younger cats that are dealing with a different kind of more covert oppression, covert racism in this society. And like I said, I mean,
it's different now, man. One of the things that I mentor a lot of young people, man. I teach young people, man. I speak to young groups and stuff, and I try to do my part, not at large, but just, I mean, it could be at a club somewhere, and next thing I know, there's 3 or 4 young cats asking me questions. So we call it holding court, okay? And they just want to know. So what I say to young cats is, because the times are so different, the whole music industry is so different now, the paradigm has changed from the 70s. And the music model is so different. Now, the music is about promotion and
fame,
presence.
money, yeah.
Well, yeah, for some. And really that's the most attractive part of it to most young people. It's about making a bunch of money and having diamonds and Lamborghinis and women and all of that, big homes and all that. But not everybody get knocked back. It's a very small amount of people trying to do that actually succeeded doing that.
Yeah, and are they really at peace with themselves,
Some of them are, and some of them are not. It just depends on how grounded you are. The guys that are grounded and listen to their parents and stuff and understand the history and what life is really about, they're grounded. Like I would venture to say that Jay-Z's a pretty grounded guy.
Absolutely. I haven't met the cat. I shouldn't be talking about it. But yeah, I mean, some cats have their head on. I mean, do you think that upbringing and that bash? I mean, Larry Vann was telling me that on the Chitlin circuit, Omaha was a pit stop for cats coming back from New York and the East Coast, coming back through, and they'd be staying in. Omaha was rocking.
Omaha, Nebraska is kind of in the center of the United States. And it was a huge railroad town. So you had people going south from Minneapolis to Kansas City through Omaha. You had people going from Chicago to Denver through Omaha.
Right.
So it's right there. It was a crossroads, and there were a lot of guys that came through on the Chitlin circuit, especially, which I was exposed to in the 60s, great musicians on the Chitlin circuit. But you'd see top flight musicians coming through Omaha, and that's what we got to be exposed to. That's why there was a group of guys that came out of Omaha that were successful because they got exposed to this music. Same thing like in Minneapolis. There's guys at Minneapolis. Wow, where's music in Minneapolis? Well, there was some serious music going on in Minneapolis. There was serious music going on in Pittsburgh, in Philly, Chicago, Omaha, New York. It wasn't just New York and LA and Chicago. It was all over the country. Then you go down south to the Delta in Louisiana, New Orleans, St. Louis. Those places, man, so the music has been there, and it all came out of the black community, man, because of our oppression and because of our desire to be creative and have something that represented us as a people that people liked and wanted.
We're going to wrap up here with Ronnie Beck, part 1 here. We're just getting started here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Could you finish with just playing the kit?
I can do that. I do want to get back to one question that you asked earlier.
Go ahead, man.
I say to the young cats is value the lessons you learn at home, because even basketball stars, football stars, baseball, anybody that reaches that level of making a lot of money through something creative, through their art or their natural ability, man.